Oh, pardon, donc je vais recommencer.
So let me begin to ensure that everyone has heard me. Welcome to meeting number 17 of the Public Safety and National Security Committee of the House of Commons. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on the 18th of September, the committee is meeting to study Canada's ability to remove foreign nationals with a criminal record. I would like to welcome our witnesses for the first hour. All from Canada Border Services Agency. Ms. Erin O'Gorman, the President, Mr. Aaron McCrory, Vice President, Intelligence and Enforcement, and Mr. Carl Desmarais, Director General, Inland Enforcement Directorate. You are all most welcome. Ms. O'Gorman, you have 5 minutes to share your opening statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
By giving you an overview of the removals process, and then I will provide a breakdown of the removals inventory. Every non-citizen entering the country is assessed for inadmissibility at the port of entry by a border service officer. If there are reasonable grounds to believe, which is the legal threshold, that the person may be inadmissible to Canada, they may be allowed to leave, be issued a removal order, or have their case referred to the Immigration and Refugee Board for an admissibility hearing. In other words, being inadmissible doesn't in and of itself give CBSA the legal authority to prevent somebody from entering Canada. People who are eligible to file a refugee claim and are assessed as high risk may be arrested by CBSA and detained. All refugee claimants who enter Canada are issued a removal order when their claim is referred to the IRB, but it remains unenforceable. Let's fast forward approximately 2 years to the point where, on average, a decision in the asylum claim is rendered. If the claim is not accepted, that is when a removal order comes into force. La loi stipule que les personnes ont l'obligation légale.
The law specifies that persons are legally obliged to leave Canada within 30 days of when their removal order becomes enforceable and once it has been issued. Despite this legal requirement, many people leave immediately once their departure order is issued.
In the last fiscal year, 12% of individuals failed to appear for their scheduled interview, and 7% failed to appear for their removal, for their scheduled removal. There are currently 30,000 people in the removal in progress inventory. CBSA officers are actively engaging with many of these people and working through them on the removal proceedings and making arrangements for their departure. The CBSA has already completed 30,900 removal interviews this fiscal year. Les raisons pour lesquelles le renvoi peut pas.
Reasons why the removal may not be immediate include allowing people to arrange their personal affairs, seeing through the holidays, let's say Christmas or any other holidays throughout the year, children finishing a school year, or recovery from surgery.
While the number has hovered around 30,000 since about 2020, it's not static. CBSA is removing about 400 people each week, on average. At the same time, the CBSA is seeing between 450 and 550 new people entering the removals inventory each week. The Immigration and Refugee Board makes approximately 70,000 decisions on asylum claims each year, of which 37% are not approved. That means about 25,900 new cases will enter the removals inventory each year. I will now say a word on our wanted inventory, which currently sits at about 33,000. Au cours des 5 dernières années, les listes de personnes.
Over the past 5 years, the wanted inventory has fluctuated year to year, but has remained relatively stable.
Are those who fail to appear for their removal processes. Once we have established that the people are actively seeking to evade removal, CBSA will issue an immigration warrant, which allows law enforcement partners to advise CBSA if they locate them. For the safety and security of Canada and its citizens, we place the highest priority on removal cases involving criminality, security, organized crime, and human rights violations. Over the past 5 years, we've nearly doubled the removals of individuals who were inadmissible on security grounds, serious grounds such as criminality. L'agence emploie environ 5...
The agency employs around 550 personnel dedicated to immigration investigations and removal activities.
Almost 200 criminal investigators whose mandate includes investigating organizations that facilitate immigration fraud or who are suspected of unlawfully acting as consultants involved with the illegal employment of foreign nationals. To the question of why we would not assign more officers to removals, I would say that everything has consequences, and we allocate our staff across the many risk factors facing Canada at the border. Finally, I would add that some of our challenges associated with removals relate to countries who do not provide documents for their citizens such that we can remove them. Here, we are actively working with colleagues, including at Global Affairs, to have these countries issue the necessary documents. It's an issue that other of our allies face, and we exchange information on this subject regularly. Merci.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And we will now hear from MP Kirkland. You have 6 minutes, Madam.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here again today. We appreciate you here and your testimony. You know, the title of the study is obviously we're looking at removals, and I know that the folks, the officers involved in that are inland officers as well, which is an example of one of the ladies who lives in my riding who has made complaints in terms of discrimination, was an inland officer. And so I have concerns that if the respect in the workplace isn't what it should be, that we will have a whole lot of difficulty with removals. So I do have a few questions regarding that and the fact that we had heard testimony from the Customs and Immigration Union president, and when I asked about his perspective on how widespread the discrimination or retaliation specifically faced by women who go through something like maternity leave or illness, his response was, yeah, I mean, the CBSA ranks last in the Public Service Employee Survey almost every year. That is not an accident. There is fear of reprisal, there's fear of reporting, there's fear of being subject to an investigation that is not impartial. Ms. O'Gorman, could you add your comments to that? Would you agree with the union president, or do you see things differently?
So I will say that I certainly heard the very emotional testimony that was provided here the other day, and I will say that I have also dealt with employees who have had unacceptable experiences.
Just interrupt you briefly. I really want to be clear. I'm not talking about experiences. I'm talking about harassment and discrimination. And there's very clear terminology that is used for a reason, because an experience could be something very light, and harassment and discrimination is something very heavy. So that's the only clarification I'd like to make.
No, okay, thank you. But perhaps I could just have the time to unpack my whole answer, because I think people's experiences are also very important and very compelling. So I'm not going to defend all of the individuals at CBSA. We have systems and processes that are there to address issues of discrimination and harassment, but I'm not going to testify that they are all working and that people don't experience discrimination and harassment in the workplace. And in fact, I think I've been quite public about the work that CBSA needs to do across all fronts including in its management, to make sure that we are aligned not only with our code of conduct, with our values, but the various policies that are in place to prevent these incidents from happening and prevent people from being subjected to harassing and discriminatory behavior. So absolutely on our public service, sorry, Mr. Chair.
I do have your answer. That's
but I'm
sort
not
of,
finished the answer.
well, I have some clarification which needs coming forward. It sounds like then you're willing to admit that some investigations may not be impartial based on what you just said.
So I'm going to step back and say we have some problems in the agency that include people being subjected to harassing and discriminatory behavior. So I'm being clear about that. We need our systems and processes to work. We need the confidence of Canadians we need the confidence of Canadians. And in order to have the confidence of Canadians, we have to have the confidence of one another. And so people need to feel that those systems and processes will treat them fairly. And in many cases, the top level of those systems and processes get adjudicated outside of CBSA, and I think that's very important. We want to solve problems before they get there, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we don't have issues.
Great.
And I would be very happy, and I note that one of the studies that you're contemplating, to come back here and go through the various actions we've undertaken, the actions that we need to continue to undertake. And I would just also
O'Gorman,
make mention,
okay.
sorry.
I do have a limited time, so I do have to get a few questions in very carefully. I think the fear of reprisal is probably one of the biggest fears that members have. And when they come to me, they're afraid. And when they've come to, even their local union reps, they're afraid of reprisal. And can you clarify for me, I know that you wrote a letter to all CBSA members. It was forwarded to me about 2 women that came forward. And you mentioned in that letter that they spoke with the minister directly. That is not something I said in my testimony here. And these ladies feel that that was a bit of a intervention which would give them the reprisal that we were exactly talking about. You made it clear. And it was very easy for those members to figure out who the women were, and therefore they could be targeted. So that is exactly an example of the fear of reprisal that they are talking about. Can I ask you, did you receive briefing notes for today's meeting from the ministry or from the minister? You didn't have a briefing about today's meeting at all, or questioning?
I've come to testify on removals.
Okay.
The material I have, so I guess, may I ask more precisely what you're asking me? So I haven't received briefings to have a discussion of particular individuals or individual cases.
Okay. It just seems to be
Sorry,
that
Madam
they're
Kirkland.
afraid.
Sorry to interrupt. As always, let me turn now to MP Akan for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for coming again. And I would like to start with my questions, but any of you can answer if you want to step in. So the committee motion noted that approximately 600 foreign nationals with criminal records are missing or have failed to attend the deportation proceedings, and CBSA is actively seeking to locate 33,190 wanted persons across its sub-inventories. We understand that absconding presents a significant operational challenge. So I know lawful access has been the conservative attack point since we started. So how will the modernized lawful access capabilities proposed in Bill C2 complement CBSA's current intelligence and enforcement strategy regarding combating threats to public safety and national security to improve the identification and location of foreign nationals who have served sentences and are now evading removal?
So in terms of how we conduct removals and our investigations, we do work with our law enforcement partners, and I understand broadly the importance of lawful access. But in terms of the way CBSA would execute its work, it wouldn't necessarily avail itself of lawful access provisions. We do obtain warrants in certain cases, judicial warrants, but in terms of our operations, we'll hand it over to Mr. Desmarais, but lawful access will not be a particular tool in the toolkit of CBSA, but I understand to the extent that it allows our policing partners to deal with organized crime and the extent to which some of those individuals would need, would be on a removal order, that would facilitate for CBSA. So in the grand scheme of things, that tool for law enforcement is very important.
If I may add, especially in the context of removals, however, in the context of criminal investigations, we might avail ourselves of that tool. But in the context of removals, we would not be using it.
Thank you. Mr. McCrory, in the past fiscal year, the CBSA removed 10,585 inadmissible people between April 1st to September 15th. With 18,785 enforced removals completed as of 31st of October 2025. The agency is nearing its goal of 20,000 removals by March 31st, 2026. So considering the dynamic nature of the removals inventory, which currently shows 29,542 removals in progress for all inadmissibility types, what specific metrics and operational adjustments are being implemented to ensure that individuals inadmissible on security grounds, serious criminality, or organized criminality who lose their right to appeal to the Immigration Appeal Division are efficiently processed and removed within this targeted canvas?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think fundamentally what we do is an active management of our inventories, and this is the responsibility of my colleague Carl Desmarais, where we've actually prioritized our removals inventories and looked at, Tier 1, which is serious inadmissibility, including criminality, Tier 2, which is failed refugee claimants, irregular asylum claimants, and then Tier 3, others, and active management of those inventories. And I liken our inventories to a bathtub. We're constantly scooping water out of that bathtub, but as the President noted in her remarks, the bathtub is filling up as well. And you can see the results of that work if you look at our inventories, and you can look at different moments in time, but if you look at our inventories right now, in all of our inventories, about 1% of those in the inventories have some sort of criminality associated with them. In our wanted inventory this week, about 2.2% of those people in the 33,000 in that inventory are associated with criminality. But then if you look at our active removals inventory, which is where the people we're actively working on, 4.3% of those have criminality. So while the wanted is at 2.2%, 4.3% of our in progress is with criminality. And you see that in the removal results. So this year so far, if you look at the last 12 months, we've removed about 22,000 people. 3.9% of that had serious criminality, or about 845 people. So it's really about active management of those inventories and focusing our efforts on serious inadmissibility, and I think you see that in results.
Thank you. So the government has committed to significantly invest to strengthen border integrity, including a commitment to hire 1,000 new CBSA officers, and a budget 2025 investment of $617 million over 5 years to enhance detection and interception capacity. Given that the President O'Gorman previously noted the dedication of approximately 500 officers to removals, so Ms. O'Gorman, could you please elaborate on how these major governmental resource enhancements, including the specific allocation of newly trained officers, will ensure that CBSA can not only maintain its current successful removal operations, but also intensify focus on the 431, I believe, foreign nationals reported who have been found guilty of serious crimes?
So going back to the border plan, allocated funding for new border service officers that we are putting to specifically to removals, and they are currently in REGO having their training, and they should be graduating in February. And then more broadly, the rest of the 1,000 officers we will certainly be putting to all aspects of our mandate, but including removals. And so they will include the inland officers and investigators that I mentioned, and removals officers as well, and support. As you can imagine, there's a good deal of support and file management that's involved in this for it to go well and efficiently, including for our clients that need to be removed. There's a lot of work there. So we will bolster the whole spectrum of our work on removals with the 1,000 officers.
Désolé de vous interrompre. Merci, Madame la députée.
So sorry to interrupt you. Thank you. Madam Ms. Bellefeuille, you have 6 minutes. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. O'Gorman, for having come to us. I've said you pretty much have an open door here at our committee. Thank you for remaining available. Earlier, you mentioned the deployment of your staffing, your human resources. I didn't quite grasp the figure. Perhaps you could give it to me again. How many officers are working on removal? And of your 1,000 new officers, 800 will be trained in RICO, and they will be working at the border stations. And the other 200, will they be available to work on removals? 550 is the number of our staff working on removal files, in criminal investigators as well.
Dans le leur travail, pour aussi,
who also work with them. So the 200, are these consultants? Are these officers trained within the service? They are trained. Are they FB4s or FB3s or perhaps FB5s? May I? Of the 550, these are enforcement officers. 380 are trained and armed officers. And the 200 being mentioned now are criminal investigators. These are the 5 level, also trained. So they are not at the borders. They are specialized in, yes, in criminal investigations and intelligence. Yes, of your 200 who are now being in readaptation, I understand that there are 8 officers trained at RICO who are no longer allowed to bear arms, but carrying out tasks FB4, but paid at FB3 level. This may seem too detailed for my colleagues, but look, here's what I'm after. What are you going to do? I'm concerned that you are going to be using considerable human resources by letting go these officers who can no longer bear arms, but who can perhaps help with other tasks, work on the removal files, for example. They're carrying out FB4 or FB3 tasks, and they're very useful. So if you're short on removal officers, why don't you take these officers who are no longer bearing arms and put them at removal? I will respond in English just to make sure that I'm truly very accurate in my answer, because, Mr. Chair, this is a very important question.
And I went back to making sure the agency manages in conformity with all of our budget and human resource requirements. I'm going to agree 100%. CBSA officers who are unarmed due to a workplace injury or some other reason, absolutely important contributors to the agency. What's happened is the agency has missed the step where we accommodate officers into an actually classified position with money to it. So as we've given those individuals other roles, they have brought their salary off of the front line. And so the exercise we're doing is to make sure that they are in classified roles, that they can contribute and bring all of the experience they have. So we're going through that process. I would say there was not good oversight in making sure we had regular engagement with those individuals in terms of what they were doing, their accommodation. Has that changed over time? So that was a management gap that we're fixing. But those individuals absolutely have a role, and we have an obligation to accommodate, and we need their skills. So whether it's just une chose, but whether it's with regard to des renvois or other aspects of the agency, we need to put them in positions with salaries attached at their level, and that's the process we're going through now.
Ce que vous nous dites, c'est que votre...
So what you're saying is that your restructuring involves classifying staff, and there's also a financial aim there. I am a manager by trade, and I don't quite understand what you're aiming for in this restructuring in an organization such as yours that is already short on human resources. And I have the impression that you're undertaking approaches that will eventually have a negative effect on the entire agency. So what's the aim?
Whatever reason, require an accommodation and are no longer tooled is as they're given work away from the immediate front line, they continue to bring their salary with them. And so we have gaps in the front line. And so you can imagine, just for ease of example, but we could do this everywhere, a small port of entry that is now down one person, the impact of that will be the other people will do more overtime and have to compensate. So what we need to do is keep the salary at the front line, but then find a position for that individual where they can contribute. Because I agree 100%. They will be bringing all of their experience to bear. And this is just making sure that they're in a funded position and that we're not having the people deal with fewer and fewer personnel at the front line that are being accommodated. So it's a matter of putting them in funded positions and making sure that as somebody is unable to work in a fully tooled position at the front line, are replaced with somebody who is fully tooled. So we're a big organization, so I'm not particularly concerned that we won't find our way to make sure that everybody lands and can contribute.
Merci, Madame de Bellefeuille.
Thank you, Ms. de Bellefeuille. Mr. Caputo, you have 5 minutes, please.
Being here, Ms. O'Gorman, I'm going to ask you these questions. 1,000 border officers were promised by the Liberal government. 0 have been hired to this point, correct?
Incorrect.
How many have been hired?
So we have 57 people hired. By the end of the fiscal year, I would estimate we should have over 100. We're aiming for more than that. We're going to be recruiting our uniformed officers over 3 years. I think if we did it any faster than that, we would risk not meeting our standards that we have maintained of excellent experienced people coming in and getting the training they need.
I understand that. Of those 57 that have been hired, were those planned hires or are those part of the 1,000 new officers?
So the 1,000 new officers, and you'll see in the budget, includes approximately 75 from the border plan and an additional 925 from the money in the budget. And it's both. So before the budget, I'll just, je vais compléter mon phrase. So
allow me to finish my sentence.
Have people who have started at Rigaud before we got the actual budget
Gorman, I'm
funding.
sorry, I have to ask you. I've asked very concise questions. Please answer concisely. Of the 57 who were hired, how many of them were part of the 1,000 promised by the government? Please, just a number.
We have, well, I'll refer you to the budget.
Well,
the budget
with
outlines,
all due respect,
Sorry, Mr. Caputo, I understand, and we'll stop the clock. That is going smoothly, but there's a point at which it's impossible for people to either interpret or listen to the interpretation. So please, let's make sure we don't overlap the conversations.
So, Ms. O'Gorman, I'm going to be very clear here. If you don't know the answer, please just say it. You said, I asked whether 1,000 new officers, 0 had been hired. You said incorrect, 57 were hired. The implication of that is that that was part of the 1,000 promised by the government. Okay? So I'm going to be very clear. Of the 57 hired, how many of them were part of the 1,000 extra officers that were promised by the government? Just a number, please.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to seek to answer the question, ideally without interruption. The budget included the funding for the officers. Based on that funding that's in the budget, 57 people have been hired.
Is that
based on that funding as it's outlined in the budget?
But that's not. I'm asking a very simple question, and I'm getting a bit of a runaround here. So I'm just going to move on here. This study was about 600 foreign nationals for whom we didn't know where they were. That's the title of the study. But the actual number we now know is we thought it was 600. It's actually 33,130. Is that correct?
So, as I've testified before, and as is posted on our website, there are approximately 33,000 people who are on a removal order who have absconded.
Without warrant, or sorry, with warrant. 33,000 people where you don't know where they are. Now, the minister actually said we have addresses for those people, or we used to have addresses for those people. Absconded is the word you just used. That would suggest we don't know where they are, do we?
So I'm going to go back to the other question because
No,
there's
I asked a
a
question
risk
here, please.
of conflating.
With
you
all
mentioned
due,
six.
With all due respect, ma'am, I'm asking questions here, and I will not permit you to talk out the clock when I'm asking very direct questions. Okay? I think we have an answer to that, so let's just move on. You said that there was screening by a border services officer. This is in order to ensure that terrorists and criminals do not come into Canada. But in fact, it was revealed in committee here that up to 50% of officers at airports are actually students. Do you acknowledge that there are frontline students who are independently evaluating with 3 weeks of experience, or pardon me, 3 weeks of training, 1 week of which is for use of force, whether they are doing the same work as an officer evaluating people coming into the country?
Our students are doing work at the airports. They are not doing the same work in terms of the evaluation and the risk assessment and decisions under IRPA.
Okay, no, I want to stop you there, please. So is what you're saying that when somebody arrives at the airport, the person who is interviewing them is not a student?
Are you talking about a traveler or somebody seeking asylum?
Both.
So
The first point of contact, is there a student there?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the question is obviously important, but we'll have to wait for the answer because time is up. We'll now move to MPSIC for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Gorman. I must confess that you've been speaking very, very clearly in your responses. Not quite sure why some of the members are having a hard time following, but I wanted to say thank you and to say we appreciate your testimony. Now, for the purposes, I understand, having heard the numbers that have been mentioned here today, that the CBSA is doing an extraordinary job. You're hitting numbers that are higher than ever previously. So thank you for that. Now, for the removal of individuals who have criminality or serious criminality, as I understand from the testimony, you have approximately 500 officers that are dedicated to that task. Is that correct? And in your opinion, is that sufficient or not?
we deploy all of our resources based on the many risks that we have. And so we did add additional officers specifically for removals that are about to graduate from our college in Rigaud. And we're constantly looking at how we deploy our resources across all of the threats. And so there are officers who have particular training in the IRPA, in the Act. And so we have a slightly smaller pool that can do those, but we constantly move people around. And I would say, I wouldn't want to find myself coming to this committee to explain why our seizures of contraband have gone down. And so we are constantly looking to where the risks are, both geographically and in terms of the threats coming into Canada, be it people who might be trying to exploit our asylum system or people who are trying to bring contraband in or firearms. So,
sure. I mean, I appreciate it. You're grappling with a number of priorities. There's no doubt about that. and resource management, that it is what it is. But that having been said, given that this specific issue is of concern to members of this committee, are you satisfied with the number that you currently have devoted to removals?
I am. And because I'll just also point out, we talk about the removals inventory, but I think it's important to understand CBSA is working closely with law enforcement officers. And so I'll just draw people's attention to the extortion announcement last week. So there will be individuals who are not on a removal order, who might be here on a student visa, who undertake criminal activities or abet them, and we can use our legislation to remove them, and we do. And so it's not, we focus on the inventories. Within the inventories, we focus on criminality. But at any other time, we're also dealing with individuals that we remove, for other acts who might not be going through the asylum process.
Well, thank you for that. The other question I had, and this is a question I generally pose to witnesses that are here, is there a technology dimension to this? Would there be any more resources that should be devoted to technology to assist all the 500 individuals who are focused on this challenge?
There is, and we can always do better. At its core, this is a human interaction, as you can appreciate.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, we have to engage with the people and work and have their removal undertaken. But we do use alternatives to detention to the tune of about 13,000. So people that might not reach the threshold of detention, but we are concerned they may seek to abscond. And so we will have electronic bracelets, we will have telephone reporting, we will have electronic reporting of various means. So we do use technology.
And are resources for that, would you deem them to be adequate?
For alternatives to detention, I would say yes, we're often increasing them. But I'll allow my colleague to add.
That's fine. I mean, if you think they're adequate, they're adequate. My last question is, I think you, in your testimony, you touched on the fact that you also require the cooperation of other governments as well. Sometimes that cooperation is not forthcoming. So how does one deal with that challenge? I mean, that must be, quite a challenge for your officers, but surely we can't allow other countries to continue to not cooperate and not see consequences to that. So how would you propose to deal with that?
So
in 10 seconds, Madame Gorman.
it takes a lot of our time. And it's an issue with our allies, and we work with our allies to look at countries that are not providing them with documents and us with the documents, but it takes a good deal of our time and our colleagues at Global Affairs time.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le député Essassi. Madame de Bellefeuille.
Thank you very much, Mr. Essassi. Ms. Bellefeuille, 2.5 minutes, please. All right. I'm not sure whether Mr. Essassi, in speaking of others in the committee, on the other side, I hope he's not including me. Of the 33,000 foreign nationals who are now being looked for on your inventory list, removal inventory, do you know the percentage of those with criminality? You said 2 or 3%. Mr. McCrory, could you just check that figure? You said that there are some on that removal inventory who present with criminality. What I'm trying to understand is your ability to deport criminals. So of the 33,000 on your removal inventory, you're looking for them, and how many of them are criminals, if I may? About 1% of that population, 1% of 33,000, and you know they are criminals. Okay, so when you issue a departure order for that 1%, have you, I guess you haven't actually intervened, detained them, and bring them to the airport to ensure that they are removed, or there is no follow-up, or how does it work? Several will be detained. We don't necessarily have the power to maintain them in that detention. In some cases, there will be some blocks to removing them, and the authority is the board's to decide whether someone will be retained or not. It's not CBSA's under our power. Thank you. But if the person is a criminal and we want to ensure they are deported, they may not be detained for a number of reasons, but are we sure that someone goes with them the day, or they're supposed to be removed to ensure that they get in to the plane, or do we just let them kind of manage their own flights and so on without following up? Many of them will be. But look, criminality, there are several types of criminality at issue. Not necessarily serious or violent criminality in all cases. There are escorted removals in a large percent of cases. At least 10 to 15% of them are escorted. And in those also, we can have officers following up to ensure that they do leave. Okay, so let's say intimate partner violence, they really beat up their partner. Do we ensure that they're escorted? Yes, the officers will carry out a risk assessment to see whether the person might be a danger to those on the plane, for example. Well, danger of their absconding and perhaps continue their criminal activity. Yes, that would be in the removal process, a risk evaluation. Thank you very much. 2.5 minutes. It's very short, but thank you for that. MP Lloyd, 5 minutes.
President O'Gorman, I appreciated the summary of your processes. I'm just wondering, the 200 criminal investigators, you gave an outline of what they do, but can you be clear, are they tasked with finding these foreign nationals with criminal records who are being removed? Is that part of the criminal investigator's job?
No.
Whose job is it?
That would be the job of inland enforcement officers. Those are the 550 officers that I mentioned, roughly 400 of which are armed and tooled officers.
Okay, thank you. And can you clarify, we talked about some 600 foreign nationals, around that number. Are those all convicted, or are those convicted and suspected or charged?
Aaron, did you want to go?
So in our inventories, when we look at somebody, in our inventories, there'll be people that'll have criminality, various degrees of criminality. It could be crimes that they committed overseas and we've discovered here. It could be crimes they've committed here. So if you look, as Carl had mentioned earlier, 1% of our total inventory are people that have some sort of criminality. They will all serve their time. These are not people.
They've been charged, but what about people who are suspected of having or have been charged with crimes?
So it's an interesting, and the President referred to this when she talked about the extortion case, and it's a great example of how we work with law enforcement very proactively to use IRPA to disrupt criminal activity. So if in the instance of the 5 cases that removals for the in BC extortion cases, we're able to make the argument we couldn't hit the criminal threshold. Our policing colleagues couldn't hit the criminal threshold, but we could hit the IRPA threshold to say there were reasonable grounds to believe that these individuals were involved in organized crime, and on that basis we're able to remove them, which is a different standard than the criminal justice system.
Now, is there currently a directive in place for CBSA investigators to opt for release of offenders without conditions into the community? Is this now the default practice of CBSA?
Could you say that again?
Is it currently a directive in place for CBSA investigators to opt for the release of offenders without conditions into the community?
The release from immigration detention or
Yes.
from?
Okay, I see there's some confusion here.
I would venture to say no. I think we assess, as Carl had suggested, we assess each case on its own merits. And then ultimately, if somebody is detained, for example, the IRB may make a decision to release somebody with or without conditions. That is not our decision.
Are you familiar with Bill C-75, the impacts on the bail system? What impact did that have on CBSA investigations? What impact did the principle of restraint that was added in Bill C-75 have on CBSA investigations?
We'll come back to you on that.
Okay, well, it's interesting because I have a directive here from CBSA from January of 2020, and it says that CBSA officers, because of the provisions of C-75, are being tasked with using conditions to consider options other than arrest. I quote, "For example, rather than arresting and bringing the accused to bail court, investigators need to consider unconditional release." So this was this was based on these new criminal code amendments. There was a directive put out to CBSA that they must also consider the release of an accused at the earliest reasonable opportunity.
MP Lloyd,
sorry.
your speed or your...
Oh, sorry, I'll try to slow down. The imposition of the least onerous conditions that are appropriate in the circumstances, including conditions that are reasonably practical for the accused to comply with. So there was a directive released to CBSA that they were to release offenders at the earliest opportunity because of C-75. Are you aware of that directive?
So we'll have to come back. In terms of immigration detention, it's the Immigration and Refugee Board that makes the decision with regard to whether people can remain detained or not. So I'll have to take the directive that you're referring to, look at it, and look at it in the context of our legislation and the decision-making processes that we have.
Okay. Have you heard from officers who are saying that they're frustrated with these provisions and being asked to release people or to recommend people for release at the earliest opportunity?
I'll come back to you on that part of it as well.
I've got about 30 seconds left. So, you've said that the flow of people coming in is outpacing CBSA's ability to get these people out. What are your recommendations on what we can do to reduce the flow of people coming in who are inadmissible?
Bill C-12 will help with that. So I think studying this and having recommendations, but generally, the more people that come in, the more people that will come into our inventory. So it's a stock and flow issue.
Thank you very much, MP Lloyd. MP Pawlowski for 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm new to this committee, so excuse my ignorance on this stuff. You've talked about the grounds for inadmissibility, security reasons, criminal record, human rights abuses, organized crime. That CBSA makes that determination, right? And that's before people go before the Immigration and Refugee Board, right?
So we risk assess people coming in. If people make a refugee claim, then they enter Canada and go through that process.
But that determination is made beforehand, and they're declared inadmissible. And if you're declared inadmissible, do you even get to the stage of appearing before the Immigration and Refugee Board?
Are you speaking about refugee claimant?
Yeah, refugee asylum
So a
seekers.
refugee claimant, for example, an officer would have to form an opinion that the person may be inadmissible. And if it's a serious inadmissibility in this particular case, what would happen is the refugee claim would be suspended, so it would be put on hold. So the issue of admissibility would be dealt with separately. And then once the issue of admissibility has been dealt with, then if the person has been deemed to be inadmissible for serious grounds, for example, it puts a stop to the refugee application.
And what appeal process is there for somebody who's deemed to be in one of these categories inadmissible?
I think there are limits to the number of appeals available for serious inadmissibility grounds.
There is an appeal process, though?
For not all grounds are created equal when it comes to inadmissibility. Some of them are going to be dealing with very serious inadmissibilities, so there's typically fewer appeals recourses for those, and then those that are perhaps on the low end of the risk spectrum, those would probably be granted a number of appeals.
How about for somebody who's deemed to be a security risk? I find that somewhat problematic. I've been involved with trying to help Afghan interpreters come into this country. I know some were determined to be security risks. I found it quite challenging dealing with this, because once you're determined to be a security risk, there's an iron curtain comes in front of us. They won't tell us why. Like what in one of them, the story eventually came out that he in Afghanistan in Kandahar had a used car dealership, and he sold cars to the Taliban, which I would hardly consider that a serious security risk, but there was no ability to challenge that. In the case of somebody who's deemed to be a security risk, is there an ability for somebody to legally challenge that determination?
All the allegations that are formulated by CBSA officers will be put before an independent tribunal. At that particular opportunity, the allegation itself can be challenged by an opposing counsel, by the client himself, or herself. So there's definitely an avenue where I think contrary information, for example, would be brought forward and debated in the context
Sorry,
of a
what,
different
what,
tribunal.
what tribunal is that?
That's the Immigration and Refugee Board.
But that's different from the Refugee and Immigration Board of Canada?
It's the same board.
Oh, it's the same. So
There's
even
different
those,
divisions. There's different divisions of the same board itself.
so even they would have an appeal process. And the determination of a pre-removal risk assessment, is that done by CBSA or is that done by our RCC?
By RCC.
Okay. And do you know if there's an appeal process there?
In immigration, I think it's fair to say that typically a decision is appealable before the federal court. And a pre-removal risk assessment, for example, would constitute a decision that can be appealed.
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
1 minute.
You briefly, and I need a quick answer because I want to get to something else. You mentioned other countries not wanting to provide documents. Like, why would countries want to provide documents? These are people you don't want back, right? Especially if they have a criminal record or organized crime. Like, is that not a problem in terms of, and what do you do in those circumstances when countries don't want to cooperate because they don't want these people back?
We persist. And sometimes they don't say no. They just take a long time. And so we persist on the diplomatic as well as our channels as well.
If I may add, it's an international obligation. Under the International Civil Aviation Organization kind of construct, it's an international obligation to provide travel documents in a timely fashion into the
Okay,
President's
thank you. And I'd like to conclude my remarks by a motion to adjourn. No? No motion. Okay, I'm withdrawing my motion to adjourn.
That would be very sad. Thank you, Marcus. That would be sad because we're now going to turn instead to MP Gill for 5 minutes. MP Gill.
Thank you very much. I want to say thank you to the witnesses, first of all, for coming here. And Chair, I do want to make it clear the last minute of my round, I would like to give it to MP Kirkland. So last minute. Thank you very much. So the Liberal government, says that Canada's immigration system and border system is working as intended. If so, how do they explain the roughly 32,000 foreign nationals that cannot be currently located? And of the 62,000 people in question, the Minister of Public Safety could confirm the whereabouts of only 30,000. Is that correct?
So your question about people who can't currently be located, it's really important to understand that's not static. So it's not the same amount of people that have been unlocated over a period of time. So of the 400 people on average that we are removing every week, that will include people from the inventory where there was a warrant and the individual's been found and they've been removed.
Are you confirming that every week there's 400 people that are being removed?
On average, yes.
What is the estimate that you're saying is 400 currently, every week, approximately 400 people?
Approximately on average, 400 a week.
Do we know the addresses of any of these people currently, of the 32,000?
Of people that we have an immigration warrant against?
Yes.
Well, some of them are serving jail sentences, so we absolutely know their addresses.
Of the people that we cannot find currently, that cannot be located?
So it's mixing all of those up. So people on immigration warrant, approximately 33,000. Some of those are serving jail sentences, and we put an immigration warrant, so when they're released, it's a signal to the institution and law enforcement to call CBSA. Other people have absconded. So when we have come to issue the removal order with them, they are hiding.
Okay.
But we are also finding them, and we are removing them. So it's not the same individuals week in, week out. When we talk about these inventories, they will be different, many different people from those we spoke about when I testified on removals a couple of months ago. So we are finding people, so people in our active removals cases are leaving.
So how long will it take to identify and remove all of the 32,000 people that are still that we have not found their whereabouts?
Well, if we could hold them constant, we could do the math. But as we've said, there are more people coming in to the inventory every week. So we remove people, the IRB will make decisions to not grant asylum, and those people will then come into our removals inventory.
If I may add a piece of data, over the last 2 fiscal years, we issued 7,041 warrants. However, we closed 9,578 warrants. This fiscal year to date, we've issued 4,706 warrants and closed 3,231. So it's very dynamic. To the President's point, that 32,000 isn't static. People are coming, people are going, and it's reflective of the overall numbers that we're dealing with.
Okay. My next question is that the government says that public safety is its top priority. If that's true, how many of these foreign nationals under the active removal orders have been apprehended in the past 12 months? Please provide a specific number.
What I can say is that we've removed 845 individuals for serious inadmissibility over the last 12 months.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I would like to give the rest of my time to MP Kirkland.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, I would like to move to resume debate on the motion I made November 25th regarding the undertaking of a study. And do you need me to read that motion again into the record, or you're good to go? It's been moved. And the reason, I want to do that, and I promise
Sorry
I
to
won't.
interrupt, because if you do wish to table such a motion, we need to proceed to a vote immediately. And see whether it's the will of the committee to do that. So I will ask the clerk to see whether there is agreement to doing that. Mr. Clerk.
Recorded division, Mr. Chair.
Please.
And what is the precise question on which we are voting, please?
It would be the motion would be to resume debate on Ms. Kirkland's motion. Okay. Mr. Ramsey? No, Mr. Ramsey, pour la vote pour résumer le débat.
No, this is a vote on resuming debate.
2 seconds okay, so let's just make. Mr. Clerk, if you can, as you were invited to do so, repeat again what the motion is, and then we'll turn to a vote.
Very good. So the motion is to resume debate on Ms. Kirkland's motion. Mr. Ramsey?
Oui.
Mr. Asasi?
Yes.
Ms. Akan?
Yes.
Mr. Polofsky? Mr. Caputo?
Yes.
Ms. Kirkland?
Yes.
Mr. Au?
Yes.
Ms. Conans?
Yes.
Et Madame de Bellefeuille?
Très bien. Avant que l'on procède.
Very well. Before we proceed to debate, I would like to thank you, Mr. Dimache, Mr. McCrory, and Ms. O'Gorman, for your time, for spending time with us, and for the very important and useful information you shared with us today. We wish you a lovely day, and we may meet again.
Ce qui nous amène à passer à...
Which brings me to cede the floor to Ms. Kirkland. Over to you.
Chair. So I will not be long, I promise you. Just a quick reminder, the reason for my motion was to raise urgent concerns regarding systematic discrimination, procedural misconduct, and lack of accountability at Canada Border Services Agency. So the findings come at a time when CBSA is seeking to hire thousands of new officers. The agency's credibility and the ability to provide a psychologically safe workplace needs to be addressed before expansion can legitimately proceed. Multiple former CBSA employees have come forward with serious allegations of systematic discrimination, procedural corruption, and retaliation within the agency's internal human resources and integrity processes. And really, you know, we would just seek to cover three things: systematic discrimination against pregnant employees who go on maternity leave and mothers, as well as those with serious illness, manipulation and misuse of internal HR systems to justify discrimination, as well as the National Integrity Center of Expertise, NICE, internal investigation processes, and breach of confidentiality in investigations. And with that, I'll just say, I think this should not be a partisan issue in any way. We want to make sure a workplace is safe for all of our officers, and if we want a safe border, we need a safe psychological place for our officers to work. And with that, I hope that we could potentially just move to vote to adopt this study. But of course, I will cede if any of my colleagues wish to debate or have anything that they wish to say.
Merci, Madame Kirkland.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkland. Ms. de Bellefeuille. Well, I think that the earlier vote tells the story, Mr. Chair. I certainly agree to carrying out this study, and I suggest that we move directly to a vote on the matter, given that Ms. Kirkland has explained in great detail the importance of the study she's proposing, the last day that we have in this session to carry out a study. So I call for a vote. A point of information.
So do you want me to read the study then? Because it's in the motion. How many meetings?
It's a minimum of 5.
May I? The reason a minimum of 5 is simply because of the amount of people that need to come before committee. I don't know that we would be able to accommodate them with less than 5 meetings.
Merci, Madame Kirkland.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkland. Any other comments, questions? That being the case, we will now proceed to the vote. And you asked, let's ask it again. Does the committee approve adopting this motion? Yes? Very well. Then the motion is carried. Mr. Bellefeuille. Very well. So I, too, Chair, would like to give notice of a motion which I hope will be supported by the members of the committee. I think you all have a copy. I have it in both languages. I will provide it to the clerk to be shared with the MPs, that we carry out a study, a minimum of 2 meetings, to consider the material requirements due to the Canada-U.S. Border Action Plan for clearing material transported over the border, that we cover the technology at issue, and that we have experts appear before us, and that the committee report its observations and findings to the House. Mr. Chair, I'm trying through all means to discuss and study the matter of goods coming in through the ports along the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Great Lakes region, and we are unable to get the actual information, the details that would be provided by CBSA about how containers are handled. And I think that we could have the specialists at the ports come in and tell us about the clearance of containers at Canadian ports of entry. It would be very helpful to all members of the caucus who are not partisan and who have been studying maritime ports of entry. It would be very helpful to know a good deal more from CBSA about the clearance of containers. So I hope that my colleagues will support this motion. A short study that would help us make a real difference in the many places across Canada that have small ports on the St. Lawrence Seaway and in the Great Lakes region. Thank you very much for this notion of motion. Ms. Bellefeuille. Mr. Caputo, you had your hand up?
I was out of order. I was going to seek to intervene, but the clerk mentioned to me that it's simply a notice of motion and we're not debating the motion, which is correct. So I will give the floor to Ms. Conans, please.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No,
Did I misinterpret?
I'd like to make a motion.
I just want to make sure that we all understand what's happening. Donc, Madame de Bellefeuille vient de...
Ms. Bellefeuille has just... No, it's not necessarily a notice of motion merely. I think this is a motion that I would like to have us vote on. It's not complicated. I'm pretty much supported by all, I believe. All right, so our process that we had carried in last June, adopted then, requires that notices of motion be presented at least 48 hours before we debate such motion. So, Ms. Bellefeuille, you have just provided us with a notice of motion. Our procedure then would suggest that we consider it in greater detail in a coming meeting.
Si on est dans des travaux de comité, le 48...
Very well, though, if we are in committee business, that 48 hours is not used. I know the procedure. Point of information. Mr. Don, yes, we certainly would agree to that. We have no problem with this. Very well, then. You're right, Madame de Bellefeuille. It's a bit confusing, and I'm sorry to have been confused, but we were carrying out a meeting on foreign nationals, and now we've moved to a motion which had been the subject of a prior notice of a motion, and now we are in committee business. That's the nature of our meeting at present.
Oui, pardon. Qui permet des motions.
Yes, but allow me to finish, such that we can now allow for discussion of motions of any type without prior notice of motion, if the committee, of course, is in agreement. So let us see whether there is any discussion arising from the motion that Ms. de Bellefeuille has just provided us with. Any comments on this motion? Any debate?
I find myself confusing people more than I wish. So we are now going to discuss that motion being tabled and proposed in a committee business section of our meeting today. So any remarks on the content of Madame de Bellefeuille's motion? Monsieur Polowski?
I just like to say I like it. I agree with it. There are several ports along the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Seaway who are looking to be able to clear customs, including my riding in Thunder Bay. So I certainly agree with this study and thank Madame de Bellefeuille on the proposal.
Merci, Monsieur le député Polowski.
Thank you, MP Polowski.
on this motion, okay? So if there is no further remark, is the committee in agreement with that motion? Good. So motion adopted. Thank you, Madame de Bellefeuille. Now turn to Madame Conans and then to Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm moving a motion, and MP Lloyd put the following on notice on motion on notice, and I'm now moving it. And the motion is that given the Department of Agriculture has advised the Penticton Shooting Sports Association that their lease is to be terminated at the end of 2025. The range has operated for 42 years and is essentially not only for recreational shooters, but also for RCMP, BC sheriffs, and cadets who depend on it for training. The planned closure of the range would deprive the community of a safe area where residents can legally and responsibly use their firearms. The proposed divestment of the land has been met with widespread condemnation from the community and the South Okanagan RCMP. The committee called on the government to rescind the divestment plan and this be reported to the House. And I appreciate everyone listening to this extremely personal and important decision that has been made, or that is imminent, hopefully not imminent. It's a deeply personal issue, a decision that will affect our community significantly. This club is, first of all, I want to say we've passed out. There's a handout, but I apologize that there's no translated version to it. Basically, it's a letter from MP Fuhr supporting the club. So this is a club, has a history of 43 years. It's a family club. There at that club, they do safety training, hunter education, youth and cadet training, and family-oriented shooting sports. There have been absolutely no complaints or issues from the local community, ever. They completely coexist. This facility creates connections between law enforcement and the public and youth. Not many clubs are there left anywhere where youth and adults can engage and interact together, and RCMP and youth engage together at this club. I don't know anyone around this table who can think of a club that does that in this day and age. This is going to be a detriment to the local RCMP. There was a public letter sent out from Staff Sergeant Bob Venimaniak to the public telling about the costs that our local municipalities and region are going to have if this club closes down. Right now, you can imagine that the RCMP is the biggest cost for local government, and they'll have to drive now many hours to get to another shooting range in order to practice. The clubhouse and range represent significant investments of time, resources, and community effort that cannot be easily replaced. It's actually in millions of dollars, and through the years that they've built through volunteers. This is all volunteers, clubhouses and archery ranges, and that really support the community. The range has strong ties, as I said, to RCMP, border services, because my riding has 6 border crossings in it, and the border crossing nearest Osoyoos, this is one of the ranges that they use, and it's the nearest range for what they need to practice. Parks Canada, Air Cadets, Scouts, local youth groups, and the hunting community. I think it's important for you to know that, members to know that in a rural area, you don't want people practicing their shooting out in the woods. We have a huge problem in our area with wildfires. We can't have local people practicing out in the woods because it sparks fires, and it also for safety reasons. So that's another reason that we really need to keep this club going. I want to say again that Liberal MP Stephen Fuhr sent a public letter out stating and requesting. He says, and you have it should have it in front of you. I believe the Penticton Shooting Sports Association has made a strong case for why their continued presence on this side is in the best interest of the community. As such, he says, I very respectfully lend my support to their request for a renewed long-term lease. MP Dan Albus tabled a petition recently signed by almost 10,000 Canadians, highlighting the vital role that this club provides in education, safety, and training. I believe it's time to reconsider and end this flawed process that no one in the local community is in favor of. No one. It's a case where government needs to leave well enough alone. There's no problem with this club. In fact, it's going to leave a real hole in our community if this lease is ended. So what I ask is that you take this divestment and please extend the lease of the Penticton Shooting Club Sports Association, and our region will be grateful, and everyone will be grateful if you were to suspend and follow the text of the motion, which calls on the government to rescind the divestment plan, and that this will be reported to the House.
Merci, Madame Corrans. Madame, Monsieur.
Thank you, Ms. Conans. Mr. Ramsey.
Denying Mrs. Conan's motion's merit, I think the chair should call the subcommittee to organize agenda at a later date. And with that, I would move to adjourn the debate and move to the budget debate instead.
So that's a motion to adjourn this debate and move to a debate on budgets. So we will now move immediately to a vote. It's a straightforward motion to vote on, I understand. So does the committee agree with that adjournment motion? With Mr. Lloyd?
I believe that dilatory motions are motions that cannot be debated, correct? But because Mr. Ramsey has put a qualifier on the motion, it is now a debatable motion. So I don't believe it would be moving to a vote. I believe it would be open for discussion. So I'd like to put my name on the docket.
Simple motions are easier to understand than more complex motions, and that motion was indeed more complex than the usual dilatory motion, because there was as MP Lloyd correctly stated, there was a move to a second step, which makes the dilatory motion more complex and would be subjected to debate, which is at this point not possible because we're discussing a motion. So we will return to Madame Conan's motion. Any input on that motion, MP Lloyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I actually had the pleasure of visiting the Penticton Shooting Sports Association facility just north of Penticton. It's an absolutely beautiful facility. It's extremely functional. You know, the loss of this facility due to this divestment plan would be a huge loss to the community and a loss to the country. And, you know, we live in a much more dangerous world. We've seen with the Russia's invasion of Ukraine and other aspects that we see countries, our allies like Poland, for example, taking real steps to strengthen their civil defense. There was a recent Globe and Mail story that talked about citizens getting more involved and receiving training in firearms. And I know that it's been a topic in the news that the Department of National Defense has put forward a paper where they're considering expanding training to, I think, 300,000 Canadians on civil defense. And I would simply ask that how are we supposed to train these 300,000 Canadians or more in civil defense if we do not have facilities such as the Penticton Shooting Sports Association? We're going to need facilities like this across Canada, not only for training the RCMP, CBSA, for training cadets. We could possibly be needing these facilities for training for civil defense, and I think the government would be making a very costly mistake to divest this facility. And I know that there are good reasons for divestments, but after touring the facility, it's become very clear that this facility is actually right next to a experimental farm that deals in testing for diseases for plants. And so I don't think that there really is any use for this facility other than being used as a certified firearms range. And so I don't know how this divestment makes any political or economic sense for the government to undertake, and we're losing a tremendously valuable facility. I know MP Conant's, MP Albus, and many others have been champions of this community range. It's not just a community range that promotes responsible firearms ownership. It's a range that's used by our law enforcement to train. They've written to the government. They've written to this committee, I believe, with their concerns about the closure of this facility. And I think it's incumbent on us to take a look into this and to put forward our opinion as a committee that the closure of this range would be detrimental to public safety. So with that, I'll end my time. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Lloyd. I have MP Caputo and then MP Collins.
I actually believe MP Kirkland had asked to intervene before me.
And MP Garton?
Yes, I would simply just say, obviously, I support this motion. My riding is the headquarters for the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, CSSA, and I know that they would support this motion, and that's really just all I would say in the effort for safe shooting sports. Of course, I would support this motion. In fact, I don't know how, I know others would like to speak on it as well, but I'd be happy to go towards a vote rather quickly to adopt the study.
Thank you, Madame Kirkland. Monsieur Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo my colleague's sentiments, and I'll remind the committee, too, that I believe he's still an acting member of our armed forces. So we thank him for his past service we thank him for his past service in the forces and our service, and it's people like him who really do keep us safe. And I think that people like that we need to contemplate. Law enforcement needs this. Perhaps the 57 officers, we don't know whether they're of the new 1,000 officers, but perhaps those 57 people like that would be using this facility. At the end of the day, I think we need to listen to the people on the ground. So I support this motion. Thank you.
MP Conans, please.
Thank you. I would ask the clerk to pass out the letters from MP Fuhrer supporting this club and asking for an extension of the lease. Is that a possibility of doing that? What do we need to do to make that happen?
Subject to the routine motions adopted by the committee at our first meeting, I am only able to distribute things to committee members if they are available in both languages.
And we can't have a vote on, or can we vote on passing out? I apologize for not having it in French, but can we have a vote on passing out that very important letter, which proves that it's a bipartisan issue?
Thank you. Well, this would be one more motion to discuss, and we are not allowed to do that now.
Okay.
So we'll have to focus on that current motion.
Then, thank you, Chair. I want to tell everyone that there is a letter, and it was made public by MP Fuhrer, who lives in a riding about an hour north of our area, but he totally supports the extension of the lease for this club.
Madame Conans, MP Sassi.
Did you say something?
MP Sassi.
I'm fine, actually. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks.
MP Al, please.
I also want to speak to this motion. Now, I'm not a firearm person, or do I have the hobby of shooting? This is something new to me. But I visited two shooting range, one in Richmond and the other one in Prince George. And I can see that, they serve a very important purpose. not only that people would have social activities, gatherings in those kind of shooting ranges, and they also have a time, a place that's safe for them to practice. And I see that the support and the enthusiasm of the people who are into the sports. Now, I don't know the details of the particular situation, but I know that if we know that there's so many people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, even across different parties, supporting the keeping of this shooting range, I think there's no reason that we should allow this to be closed. So with that, I support the motion.
Thank you, MPR, for that. MP Sassi, I saw your hand raised.
I'd like to bring a motion to adjourn.
So we are now going to vote on that motion to adjourn the meeting, having heard the earlier comments. So is the committee in support of that motion to adjourn? So we'll have a recorded vote. Mr. Clerk, please.
Mr. Ramsey? Yes. Mr. Asassi?
Yes.
Ms. Akan?
Yes.
Mr. Pulaski? Mr. Caputo?
No until we vote.
Ms. Kirkland?
No.
Mr. Au?
No.
Ms. Conans?
No.
Et Madame de Bedfay?
So okay, well, this could keep the discussion going. So we're back to the motion of Madame Conans. Madame Kirkland?
Can we call for a vote on the motion that's on the table? Is that possible?
The vote will follow whenever everyone is ready for that. So let's go to a vote on that particular. Madame Akan?
Is the motion open for amendments?
Chair just called for a vote.
Obviously, we can amend.
Point of order, Chair. You just called for a vote. I don't know that we can be asking for amendments. You just called for a vote, so I think we need to proceed to the vote.
Yeah, this is a bit. No, the flow of this is rapid. So, and I understand the challenges that there may be in understanding the interconnection between motions and amendments and adjournment motions. So that's, and as you noticed earlier, I was initially confusing on the move from the witnesses session to the committee business session. So allowing for everyone's understanding is, I believe, the right thing to do. Madame Akan, you're asking whether an amendment can be put to a motion, and the answer is yes.
Point of order, Chair. I would challenge the Chair's interpretation there. You had called for a vote.
So what challenge?
I'm challenging your decision to allow a amendment when you had called the vote.
So you're challenging so you'd like to move to a vote. Now, moving to a vote is not a motion, not an acceptable motion in a committee. So what exactly are you asking for?
Yes. Well, you had called the vote. You had said we are proceeding to a vote. At that point, I believe that the vote should have occurred or should have commenced. You said we are calling the question essentially, and then an amendment was brought forward. I believe we should be voting because you had called the question at that point.
So I asked whether we wanted to have a vote, and I turned around and I saw that Madame Akan wanted to ask a question on the proceedings, which I understand are a bit complex to follow, and I would believe that members of this committee would deserve a fair chance at making their full participation in this particular meeting. So, Madame Akan, you can proceed with your earlier intervention.
Are we going to just do the amendment, or you challenge the chair? What are we doing right now?
Seconds, and we'll come back.
Yes, thank you.
some turkey or ostrich or anything else. We'll start again. Nous recommençons la rencontre. Merci d'avoir patienté quelques instants. Alors, le député Lloyd met en cause la décision de la présidence. Je me tourne donc vers vous avec l'aide du greffier pour voir si cette décision...
I turn to you with the help of the clerk, given that MP Lloyd has challenged the ruling of the chair.
M. Caputo, hein, pardon. C'est une très...
Yes, a very good team, Mr. Caputo and Mr. Lloyd. We sometimes confuse one for the other, take one for the other. So Mr. Caputo has challenged the ruling of the chair. According to public approval rates, they're both beautiful, they're both lovely, they're both handsome. So, of course, the public's always right. So let us now move to call a vote on Mr. Caputo's challenging of the ruling of the chair. I will ask our clerk to assist us.
Okay, no, that's a bit. So, Mr. Caputo, you're dropping the motion. Okay, so we'll turn to Madame McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Caputo. I would like to amend the motion and remove the report to the House from the motion. So
let's make sure that I understand, that certainly you understand what that means. Mr. Clerk, when you have a moment, can you have explained what the motion would then look like with this amendment?
So this is my understanding, please correct me if I'm incorrect, that Ms. Akan is moving to remove the final clause from the motion. So the final line would read, the committee call on the government to rescind the divestment plan, period. Is that correct, Madame Akan? Et en français, le comité demande au gouvernement d'annuler.
And the committee calling the government to rescind the divestment plan.
Donc, est-ce que tout le monde a suffisamment bien saisi, Madame de Bellefeuille?
D'abord, quand on dépose des motions, c'est le fun de les avoir écrites dans les deux langues.
Now, when we, of course, table motions, it's good to have them in both languages, and Mr. Lloyd tabled this last week, so there's absolutely no excuse that I should not have the French version of the motion we are now discussing and that we will call for a vote on. Now, what the clerk just summarized in French really doesn't tell me really what's going on. Could you read the entire motion so I'll know exactly what I'm voting on? Please, Mr. Clerk. The motion has been distributed to all MPs. You have it among your emails. In French, we read that given the Department of Agriculture has advised the Penticton Shooting Sports Association that their lease is terminated at the end of 2025. The range has operated for 42 years and is 42 years, and is essential not only for recreational shooters, but also for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, British Columbia sheriffs, and cadets who depend on it for training. The planned closure of the range would deprive the community of a safe area where residents can legally and responsibly use their firearms. The proposed divestment of this land has been met with widespread condemnation from the community and the South Okanagan RCMP. The committee calls on the government to rescind the divestment plan.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Mr. Bellefeuille. So what you've read is the motion that we are now voting on, and yes, and then what has been removed is, and that this be reported to the House. Correct. Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for requesting this clarity. It's very important to understand what we're voting on. So we are now debating the amendment to the motion. Does the committee support the amendment and carry it? Good. Then we are now back to the amended motion. Further debate? Is the government in favor of adopting this amended motion? Yes? Yes? Yeah, I see that there is universal support. Very good. Which brings the debate on this motion to a close. I will take advantage of this moment to ask the clerk to present two budgets to us. We will need to decide on their outcome.
C8 and C12. Mr. Clerk, can you proceed, please?
Yes, of course. So these budgets were distributed to members by email on November the 18th. They are routine study budgets. These are adopted by committees for all studies that they do. The one on Bill C8 is in the amount of $18,700, and the one on the study on Bill C12 is in $15,000. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions?
Is there going to be enough money to go on location in Penticton to see the shooting range?
I'll be your tour guide.
Good. So no question. Therefore, though, I presume these budgets are adopted. Good. So seeing the time and no further intervention, I will move to adjourn.